All right. I wish you guys were here with me at the Sea Change Summit, live and in person at the Hula Lakeside and beautiful Burlington, Vermont, right on Lake Champlain. This is absolutely epic. Tom, I went electric foiling with Russ, the founder of Hula.
Wow.
And, it was hard to believe that I actually wasn't at a little surf town with the scene he's actually set up around here. It's so cool. Really, really, really special. I do just want to give a bit of context for the Q&A because obviously we don't have Alex Schultz from 4Ocean here. We don't have Danny Washington, who is just on the pre-recorded. They're both off doing other things. Danny actually was just up in Alaska, seeing the ecosystems up there. So, but we got the band back together with me. I'm one of the co-founders of Sustainable Surf and SeaTrees. I'm Michael Stewart. You've probably seen my little tag. We also have Kevin Whilden in the house. Kevin is our chief scientist, and you would have just heard him. Co-founder also. And then we got the one, the only, the amazing Tom Ford, executive director of the Bay Foundation. Probably the coolest nonprofit in conservation work that we've ever had the pleasure of working with. Straight up.
Thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah, and so like I said, Tom and Kevin are back in California where we're based and do our work. I was fortunate enough to be invited to actually come out here to Hula to be involved in person to work with Ryan and to really see the community that's being set up around here that actually is incredibly stoked about supporting projects like SeaTrees and other conservation things. And this little group of building, there's incredibly cool companies here. I actually had a meeting with Kate, the CEO from 1% for the Planet. 1% for the Planet is a great organization that we've been a part of for a long time. Many of those brand partners, like 4Ocean, are actually also members of 1%. That's how they actually give donations and support to SeaTrees. So it was really cool to actually meet their team and see them in this space. It's just, it's one big love fest here. So why don't we kick it off and start answering questions about the superpower of the ocean, right? The theme of what we're talking about, really the superpower of the ocean to solve climate change and to do a lot more. Kevin, I'm going to kick that question to you. Maybe block that out, and then let's get into questions to Tom about the actual project site itself. So for people who are just tuning in right now, Kevin, what the hell is the superpower of the ocean?
Yeah, I mean, this is the sort of the narrative shift that we need to think about in terms of climate change, how to solve it, and what the best solutions are. The ocean really is the place to start. 90% of all the carbon in the carbon cycle, that's all the carbon that we breathe, that is in the air, that's in the soil, that's in the ocean. The whole carbon cycle is 90% of all of that is in the ocean. And when we go from like an ice age where there's like a mile thick layer of ice over Vermont, where you guys are right now, to a warm period, the ocean's carbon content only changes 2%, right? So the question is, how can we use that power of the ocean to store carbon to take out as much CO2 as we can now, to basically turn down the thermostat of all the CO2 we're emitting and put it in a place that's basically permanently sequestered, and that's blue carbon. So blue carbon is basically plants that live in the ocean. It could be as small as phytoplankton, or it can be kelp forests or mangrove forests, or even a coastal watershed that's connected to the ocean. All those systems are incredibly efficient at sequestering CO2. They can, it's said that a mangrove forest sequesters 10 times the carbon as a tropical rainforest. And that's because of this connection to the ocean and this ability of the ocean to solve it. So what we want to think about is, how can we enhance the ocean's own ability to sequester CO2? And that's where we come in, about finding ecosystems that can be not only restored, but protected and maybe even expanded.
Right. And Kevin, the ecosystems that we directly support in California include kelp forests, right? And so I want to kick it over to Tom Ford, who has actually been really the person who has figured out, how can we do kelp forest restoration in a systematic way, measurable, and not just do a little project here, but to actually regenerate the health of entire areas, and then how do we actually scale that up from, just the Palos Verdes headland, Tom, to the rest of California and to the West Coast? Maybe just I'll kick that off to you. Like, hey, man, what do you think the ability of the Palos Verdes kelp forest project that you started, we've come in to help support via SeaTrees, what's that going to do? Is that a model that can be scaled up around California, West Coast, and the rest of the world?
Thanks, Michael. So I think the simple answer is absolutely. And it was the intention at the start of the project to conduct enough and substantial science to define whether or not we were being successful. Yeah. So that the techniques that we were applying, the approaches to community building and involvement could be quantified. And therefore, we were building a model that we could, pack up, shove in a shipping container and move up the coast or down the coast or around the globe, as our kelp problems in California are not solely limited to LA or the Central Coast or the North Coast. It's all over and it spans the world. So fortunate that that the world is paying attention to this issue. And as Kevin pointed out, right, all these amazing systems help us sequester carbon. In this case, if we lose the kelp, we lose that connection. So we've got to get back where we can. The demand is obvious. The need is obvious. And I think we have solved a number of the questions as to how can you actually go out there and get this work done.
That's amazing. Tom, we didn't have a whole lot of time on the pre-recorded session to dig into some of the amazingly cool stuff that you're doing that's in addition, like use of robotics, how you're also doing restoration, outplanting of abalone into the restored kelp forest, and how we're bringing back, the health of the entire ecosystem. But before we get into that, Ryan Harris is basically just going, when do I get to go see this in person? So I'm going to let Ryan in right now. Let's have a quick conversation, because that's actually one of the amazing things. Let me click on this. Ryan, you should be coming in here pretty soon. You just have to share. Here we go.
There he is.
Hey, you're on mute still, Ryan. So pop that off. That's your video. You got one more click. You're still on mute. Come on, brother. Get it, Ryan. Yeah, hey, just the microphone thing there. Click that and you'll have it off. Hey, while Ryan's still the mute thing, I'll just set this up, right? So basically, one of the amazing things about the Kelp Forest Project, Tom, right, that I always love is that you can actually see the project literally from the top of the cliff, right? Like, people have access to this. People can actually go out in a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard, like made by Ryan Harris at Earth Tech, 5 miles away from the kelp forest, right? And it becomes real. Like, they can actually access it and visit it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the benefits that we're talking about, the secret power of the ocean, that blue carbon sequestration, that is a component of what we're trying to do. We're also trying to provide all these other direct, multiple benefits that a kelp forest has. It helps clean up the waves so that, it keeps the chop down, dude. So you got better rides for longer every day that you're out there. It provides a habitat for 700 plus species of organisms that you either enjoy scuba diving with, snorkeling with, spear hunting, fishing. We're nourishing people, families, a place off of Palos Verdes. It is absolutely a tangible, direct thing that's sitting central to one of the largest metropolitan centers on the coast in the world. And I think that is also this amazing part of the connections that these types of projects can create. So for sure, man, I don't know how many people have visited our kelp forest or even know that it's our kelp forest that we put back. But we're thrilled to be having those results materialize.
Amazing. Yeah. Hey, Ryan.
Ryan's getting up. He's just coming down the hallway to sit down.
Hey, Ryan, why don't you just come into the room and you can pop on the same thing and you can ask Tom one of your questions right there. But until you do that, I'm actually gonna let Carl in, and we'll pop Carl up and see if, hey, there we go. Hey, Carl.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. Cool. Ryan's going to sit down. Carl, you got a question for Tom? You got a question for us about SeaTrees, blue carbon in general? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, it's all kind of combined. So I'm here in Australia, as you can see, it's very dark outside, very early in the morning. So I apologise that I'm a bit hazy. I run a marine conservation and development organisation, and we work in Australia, India, and the Solomon Islands. We've just started exploring. I was actually part of a kinship program in the States in 2019, and one of my friends there runs forest carbon in Indonesia, which is one of the world's largest forest offsetting programs.
Yep.
So we had a lot of heated debates about carbon offsets and carbon credits, and I had a few qualms about it at the time, but our organisation's been exploring that for the past couple of years, and we've just started getting into the blue carbon space in Australia, which is very new here. I have a million questions, but I'll try and keep it brief. We're actually working on a river at the moment to restore mangroves and seagrasses, and we're really interested in the potential in India as well. Obviously, huge challenges in the coastal communities we work in Kerala, and a massive amount of mangroves in dire need and huge areas that need to be restored. So I think there's a lot of potential there. One of my questions is probably for Tom and also for you, Michael, with the SeaTrees project, is how you guys prioritize what your blue carbon projects are. I guess, Tom, with you, it's the area that you work in and where your organization's focused, so it makes sense. But also whether you're seeing like good returns from credits. Are you guys currently running a carbon credit trading program? And do you think that credits could be something that funds these projects into the future? Because I know at the moment the costs in countries like Australia and the US are enormous, and the amount of credit returns that you get is quite small. So really interested in how you guys think the future of carbon credits will evolve in this blue carbon space, and whether you think that they'll be key to funding future programs.
Great question. I'll take the carbon credit side of things and our other program or our other types of conservation projects that we invest in. But Tom, why don't you go first? Because I think the carbon credit side is super interesting in terms of kelp, because there is no market mechanism to value all of the work that those kelp forests are already doing, right?
Yeah, no, and Michael, I appreciate you prompting me, but I think this is perhaps more in Kevin's wheelhouse than mine. Carl, we've been building this project up over the past a little over 20 years. So when we first got into this game, blue carbon, carbon credits, all that was, I don't want to say far from our thinking, but it was still something that we didn't intend to really get after. It was, Kevin and Michael's thinking on how to patch this together that worked. This was about a local ecosystem service, local biogeochemical cycling, and some other ecosystem services. What I can say is that it's been working terrifically. I think I already stated, the demand, the need is obviously huge. And I'm hoping that, with SeaTrees, Sustainable Surf, and others, we can, be the tip of the spear to help push this stuff through.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, why don't you just go into some of the work that you're actually doing with Scripps to lay down some of the foundations for how we're hoping and helping to get kelp forest into the market where carbon credits could even be a way to fund these things. And then I'll take up what we're doing with carbon credits and how that factors into our SeaTrees program right now.
Yeah, so here's the thing about carbon credits that I think most people don't realize how they're made. The first step of making a carbon credit is there's got to be something called a methodology, a blueprint by which third-party verifiers can go and verify that carbon was removed, and then that becomes an actual serialized, tradable financial instrument. Behind the methodology is actually the hardest part, which is the science that allows this blueprint methodology to actually exist. And that's what Tom and I and the Scripps Institute of Oceanography are developing right now, is how can we get the science of kelp forest carbon sequestration so well known that you can actually create a methodology that any kelp forest around the world can then access carbon funding to continue to grow and thrive. Because that's the idea of carbon credits, is that actually it's a value of an ecosystem to thrive and sequester CO2. So what Tom and I and the Scripps Institute of Oceanography are doing currently is we're finishing up a proposal to conduct a comprehensive biogeochemical research project at Palos Verdes, at the Bay Foundation's project, to measure the carbon that's being basically pulled out of the atmosphere by the kelp growth and then sequestered off by kelp breaking off and sinking into the deep ocean, or through dissolved organic carbon actually coming off of the kelp forest and flowing down the submarine canyons into the deep ocean as well. And here's a cool fact about kelp that I just love. So kelp is one of the fastest growing plants in the world. Giant kelp can grow up to 2 feet per day. I mean, imagine 2 feet per day growing. It turns out that it photosynthesizes even faster than that, and it literally can't grow fast enough to absorb all the carbon that it fixes. So it exudes that carbon, as dissolved organic carbon, that goes out into the ocean. So carbon exudation, 40% of the photosynthesis gets actually immediately emitted into the ocean, which then is picked up by local biology and also sent out by the ocean circulation to sequestration. So I think kelp is one of the most exciting carbon sequestration organisms on the planet. And we're stoked to be working on this to make it into a carbon credit reality.
Yeah. Hey, Carl. So if you don't have a quick question about that, I'll just let you know what we're doing with carbon credits as we're using them in the SeaTrees program, all right? And then maybe sort of follow up. But it's actually pretty simple. We have an all of the above strategy, right? So where we do use carbon credits, and this is most specifically with our service for wiping out or offsetting miles from travel from cars or flights or things like that, as well as what we actually have for brand partners, which is called the Ocean Positive Climate Verified Plus program, right? That's actually backed up by a carbon credit that's doubly certified, both for its carbon, so it's got a BCS certification, and for all the other things that it actually does in the community. It's called CCB, right? The Climate, Community, and Biodiversity Certification. So it's got a double certification. It is the only reef to ridge watershed project that we know of that matches what we invest in, which is only blue carbon ecosystems. It's actually been certified by long-term partners of ours that we work with called Wildlife Works. They're one of the pioneers of carbon programs in the world. They did the world's first Red Plus project over 20 years ago in Kenya, right? So great outfit to be working with. I sit next to the guy who's gone through the project to do the certification. They actually have an office, strangely enough, right here in Burlington, Vermont. I was just having beers last night with Simon, who is the person who actually does all of the certification services work, right? So, and I'm just setting you up with this because you said I wasn't quite sure about carbon credits or if it should be used or whatever else. And that's actually been this really kind of weird thing where people say carbon credits, does that mean that it's a license to pollute, or I'm not quite exactly sure what that is. I was having a meeting with Gabby, who's our nonprofit coordinator here for 1% for the Planet, also based right out here in Hula. And I was explaining this to her. I said, when it comes down to it, a carbon credit is really just a way for the market to be able to finally value the services that are already being delivered by that ecosystem and by the protection, in this case, of that particular ecosystem. So it's not a pollution, or a license or anything. It's simply, how do we value this in the marketplace so that funding can actually come in to that project, as well as all of these other conservation projects that need the funding to happen right now. So to answer your question very directly, carbon credits absolutely can and should be part of the funding model for all types of different ecosystems. But with kelp, there is no methodology yet. There's no way to get that into the marketplace. We also invest in coral reef projects in Bali with our partners at Ocean Gardener. That doesn't have a methodology for conservation in the marketplace yet. That doesn't mean that those ecosystems aren't worth saving or that we don't need to do that. It just means that they haven't gotten to the same place that mangrove forests, for instance, have just gotten right now, or other terrestrial forests, right? So basically, where we need to, we'll work with carbon credits. But we also, through the SeaTrees platform, we've actually made it incredibly easy for brands and individuals to come in and say, I don't really care about the carbon credit. It's not what I'm most focused on. I'm focused on what is the work being done in this ecosystem, right? So we can plant trees on behalf of companies like CVs, right? Small Southern California, Santa Barbara brand. I'm actually wearing them right now. They make great shoes, super eco. Every single one of those shoes restores 1 square foot of California kelp forest via our partnership with the Bay Foundation through the SeaTrees program, right? So essentially unlocking the revenue that's needed for these projects in a number of different ways, including the use of carbon credits.
No, that's fantastic. Really, really good answer too, Michael. And I think this is one of the things that we're wrapping our heads around at our organisation at the moment is our focus is ecosystem services and restoring ecosystems and protecting rivers. We're very, very far behind you guys in a lot of things. Also more progressive in some things, but not when it comes to conservation. I think it's really exciting to see what's coming out of the States and projects like all of yours that are going to be informing the work that we do in Australia. We don't have any methodologies available for anything blue carbon at the moment. It's something that's still being worked on. It's only real soil and forest carbon methodologies out there.
Right.
So we're working with some of those service providers to try and develop that methodology. But yeah, I think the conversations we've been having in our organisation have been, this is about ecosystem services. This is about protecting the ocean, bringing back fisheries, addressing nutrient into the Great Barrier Reef. And that's where the focus needs to be. And blue carbon is a benefit of that and potentially a way we can fund it in the future. So really exciting. Thanks for answering my questions. And
so Carl, DM us, reach out via email. Let's not have this be the last conversation.
Totally.
Our methodology, the way that we work, and Tom can back this up, is collaboration. We see everyone as a collaborator in this space. There's so much work that has to be done so quickly. How can we help you? How can you help us? And we can tell the story. And actually, we only have 3 minutes left, I think, in our session. I want to bring Ryan in. Ryan, get over here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties.
Sit down.
Thanks, guys. We'll chat to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks,
Carl. Thanks for waking up early, man.
Yeah.
No worries. Cheers.
Hey, Ryan. So, all right, post into Facebook. So one of the great things that we have on our side in terms of telling this overall story is great partners like Ryan Harris at Earth Technology Surfboards, right? He builds only eco boards. It's the first eco board factory in the world, based out of California. His factory is literally the closest surfboard manufacturing place to the kelp forest project in the world. He's building boards right in Torrance, and that's essentially the top of the kelp forest project. Every single board that Ryan makes is an eco board, and also every single one of those boards ends up planting a seed tree as well. In this case, he's focused on restoring a square foot in California kelp forest. Ryan, my question to you is, how can this stoke of surfboards and what you do help additionally bring people to the idea of these ecosystems that we actually ride these surfboards in are important enough for me to be paying attention to? How can your surfboards help open people's eyes to the places that we have to, the places that we need to protect in order to play in them?
Well, I think it's first and foremost.
You got 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's about transparency, right? So that's my answer. That's my short and concise answer. Transparency.
You want to know that if you're giving us funds from the building of the surfboards, where that's actually going to.
Yeah,
right?
And that's why I want to get on a boat and go to the site. I've been jonesing because of COVID. I couldn't, but now I'm like, that's my question to you guys is, are you going to open it up to VIPs and a few people to go and actually see it? Because you know me, I'll be on my phone, and I think more people need to see what's exactly going on, because seeing is believing. It's really as simple as that. The CNN video was freaking insane.
It was.
And I really hadn't grasped the notion until I saw that. So now I want to see it with my real eyes and see it in person. I'm pretty excited.
Ryan, as soon as you're back in LA, dude.
I think it might happen.
The boat's in the shop right now. It'll be back in the water next week, fingers crossed, and we'll be back underwater again. God, I'd been out on the beach with you any number of times, and we've just never made it over to the forest. So just consider it done.
That's it.
Amazing. And Ryan, yeah, that's actually the cool thing is that I've taken your paddle boards, and Kevin has, straight out from the beach into the project, right? So
Cool.
that's really cool. Like, we'll get you out on the boat under the water and everything, but people can access these places literally by hopping in from the beach on an e-tech.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm due for an addition to the quiver, Ryan. So I'm gonna take the opportunity when we're on the boat to start talking that out with you.
Perfect.
Yeah,
And
Jack,
I'm going to add one little shameless promotion. We're actually going to raffle 2 boards off that we're glassing here. And
Nice.
the proceeds are going to SeaTrees. So we're going to be able to plant more trees.
Perfect. Hey, I've got a couple things here. Eski, how's it going? So good to see you. Our senior,
Vicky.
yeah.
Hi, Vicky.
Yeah. We have Mark saying, like, it sounds like Ryan wants to score some tasty waves. We have Sue Divine. How do we get into the raffle? Yeah.
Link in bio. Go on Instagram. It's
Yep.
on Sustainable Surf. It's on Earth Technologies.
Yeah,
There
exactly.
you go.
Go do it. Thank you all. Aaron, I think we're out of time. Else I would patch you in. Harriet, I'd also do the same thing. Please hit us up. DM us on our Instagram channels to ask any of these other questions. Huge thanks and shout out to Russ Scully and the team from Hula for putting together the
Hula.
summit. This is absolutely amazing. We hope we get invited back.
Pretty awesome.
All right. Peace. Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.